Honeymoon role, Marc Berger. Marc, this is where you come up. The timing starts when he starts talking, just for rules' sake.
Konnichiwa. The title of my speech is Honeymoon Role. It is only semi-autobiographical. Now, there was a couple who were recently married in Japan, and as a wedding present, the father gave them, of course, a trip to Florida. So they landed in Orlando and had a wonderful time. The father also gave them his precious Nikon F4 camera that he had had for many, many years to his son. It was an antique. So the couple had a nice time in Orlando, and one day they decided to visit Tampa, Florida, to see the beach. And they found out there was a place called Honeymoon Island. So they decided, since they were on their honeymoon, they better go to the island. So they packed up all their gear in a picnic basket, and they went to the island, and they had a wonderful time at the dog beach and at the regular beach. They decided to pass up the ferry to Calabasas because they didn't have time. Now, before they got there, the son had taken his Nikon camera that his father gave him and couldn't figure out where the slot was or the quick screen to see what he had actually taken, and had no idea how to load the film. But he went to CVS and bought some film, and the CVS guy tried to help him load it. And of course, my guy was clumsy. And they couldn't find the manual online because it was a 1950s camera. So they went to Honeymoon Island, and he figured they'd take some pictures. Then they heard about the nature trail. And the nature trail goes all the way around the island, and at the far end of the nature trail, there's a bald eagle nest where the bald eagles have babies. So they decided to go out on the nature trail. So he had his camera ready, took a couple of pictures, nature trail, Honeymoon Island, and they went. And they were about a quarter of the way down the trail when they found a side trail. And being adventurous, they decided to try the side trail. So it went in through the bushes, but there was a trail. And they walked over the salt flats and the fiddler crabs, and they came to an isolated cove, a little rocky cove off at St. Joseph Sound. So they decided this was a great place, took a couple of pictures, spread their picnic blanket out, and decided to have a picnic. So they sat down, had their food, and they drank some wine. A little bit of wine. And then a little bit more wine. And then a lot more wine. And they had some fun. And he decided to take some pictures. And his wife decided to be a little coy, so she took off her t-shirt, and was wearing a bikini. Now, it wasn't particularly sexy, it wasn't a thong, but it was a bikini. And he decided, and she decided, that he would take some pictures of her. So he got out his camera and took a couple of pictures, and she posed for him. And then he said, "How about Sports Illustrated bathing suit edition?" So she started doing a little bit more risque things, and eventually got to the point where she took her top sort of off, and then got brave, and she began to get really into it. So she was posing, he was shooting pictures, and then he said, "Tasteful Playboy." And she said, "Well, it's an isolated niche, nobody's here." So she took off her bottom and did some back pictures, and eventually got really into it and had a wonderful time. And then click, 36 exposures, the camera wouldn't work anymore. So she put back her clothes on, and they had their picnic again, and they had a little bit more wine, and they were getting ready to go on their nature trail when it began to rain. So it began to rain, it was pouring. They quickly packed up everything, almost everything, and they got into their car, soaking wet, drove back to their hotel, had dinner, and all the usual tourist things. eventually they went back to Japan, and he realized that he forgot the camera. It had been lost somewhere. And he realized at Honeymoon Island in the rain, he must have left it on a rock somewhere. So with much embarrassment, he confessed this to his father, and his father was understanding, and things were going fine until about 3 weeks later, a box came, a DHL box. And the box, he didn't know what it was, but it had a Dunedin return address. So he opened it, and there was his father's camera, slightly worse for the wear, and a note. And the note said, "I'm the park ranger at Dunedin, Honeymoon Island. Somebody found this camera on the beach. We were able to look up the serial number, and back then these were registered, so we called Nikon. We found out who the owner is. We contacted your father. He told us, he gave it to you. So here it is, we're returning it. And in a token of our sorrow, we decided to develop a film for you." So of course he was scared to death. Here's pictures of his wife. He knew that everybody at CBS, when they develop them, kept spares, and he figured they were going to go on the internet and his wife would be ashamed in front of all the world. So he took out the camera, and there was the CBS film container. So he opened it up, again scared, and he saw negatives. He didn't know what a negative was. So there was a negative, and then there was a note from the developer. It said, "We are sorry to tell you, all your pictures came out blank. Apparently you had misloaded the camera, we're sorry." And then he looked at all the pictures, and sure enough, they were blank. And so ends their honeymoon roll adventure. Sayonara.
Thank you, Mark. Sergeant